I think that's a mistake. I should never have said anything like that. I think just moving into a different territory. I've acted long enough, you know.
In 2025, a bombshell leak from inside Hollywood left the industry reeling. At 88, Robert Redford, arguably one of the most revered figures in cinema, revealed a shocking secret: the 7 actors he despised the most. These were not the names of minor stars or forgotten figures. They were some of the biggest, most influential actors in the industry, people with whom Redford had once shared the screen, chemistry, and even friendships. Yet behind the glitz and glamour, these men and women had, in their own ways, wounded him deeply, whether through betrayal, manipulation, or unspoken rivalries. The list, kept hidden for decades, sent waves across Hollywood. Why did Redford wait until the twilight of his career to reveal it? What drove him to finally speak out against those who had once been his colleagues, or even his friends? And who were these actors that had hurt the icon so profoundly? Today we're diving into the stories behind Redford's list of love, loss, betrayal, and how, even in Hollywood, the wounds that shape an icon's career are rarely visible to the public. But first, let's explore the actor who started it all, the one who would always be Redford's greatest Hollywood adversary, Marlon Brando. It all began one fateful night in March 1974 at the Chateau Marmont, a Hollywood hotspot where the biggest stars mingled, where power, talent, and egos collided. Robert Redford had just been invited to join the Academy's Board of Governors, a move that marked him as one of the brightest stars in Hollywood's sky. The press couldn't get enough of him. He was the clean-cut, politically aware, and talented actor who embodied the ideal of Hollywood. Yet, as Redford entered the lounge, it was clear he was about to have an encounter that would shape his future in ways he couldn't have imagined. At that party was Marlon Brando, a man who had already begun to carve a path of defiance in the industry. Brando was known for his rebelliousness, having famously boycotted the Oscars in 1973 by sending a Native American activist in his place. But at this gathering, the tension wasn't just ideological, it was personal. When Redford extended his hand in a friendly gesture, Brando's response wasn't what anyone would expect from a fellow Hollywood icon. Instead of shaking hands, Brando looked him up and down, then snatched the promotional poster from Redford's hands. Without a word, Brando tore the photo in half and stared coldly into Redford's eyes. "Listen," Brando said, his voice low, cutting through the tension in the room like a knife. "You're no artist. You're just a shiny decoration for the white Hollywood system I despise more than anything." The words hung in the air, leaving Redford frozen. It wasn't just an insult, it was an indictment. Brando wasn't attacking Redford's acting ability. He was attacking his very essence, the image Redford had carefully cultivated in Hollywood. From that moment on, their relationship would never be the same. Redford was left to stew in the humiliation of Brando's words, a memory that would haunt him for decades. Over the years, their feud remained mostly silent, with subtle jabs thrown by Brando, who, in interviews, continued to criticize the younger generation of actors. Brando's resentment seemed to stem not just from professional rivalry, but from something deeper, more personal. Redford was the polished, commercial star that Brando had once been, yet now he was the one everyone wanted. To Brando, Redford represented everything he'd grown to loathe about the Hollywood system. Unlike Marlon Brando, Clint Eastwood wasn't just a Hollywood icon, he was a political force in his own right. While Redford had long been known for his progressive, liberal views, supporting anti-war movements, environmental causes, and LGBTQ+ rights, Eastwood had built his career on a different foundation. The actor-turned-director was staunchly conservative, an outspoken critic of the left, and a supporter of Republican ideals. His political beliefs, much like his films, were gritty, unapologetic, and often divisive. And it was that very ideological divide that would ignite a rivalry between Redford and Eastwood that would linger for years. The conflict began over a project that Redford was deeply passionate about: The Divide, a film exploring the dark truths of money laundering between U.S. politicians and the military. The Divide was a political thriller that held a mirror to the systemic corruption Redford had spent much of his life opposing. But Eastwood, ever the conservative, saw the film as an affront to American values. When he caught wind of the project, he couldn't let it slide. He wasn't just going to let Redford's critique of the system stand unchallenged. He had to act. It was reported that Eastwood used his industry connections to sabotage the project before it could gain any momentum. According to Richard Langley, a former executive producer who had worked with both men, Eastwood made a secret call to a Republican congressman, warning him about the contents of the script. A few days later, Redford's production company received a subpoena from the intelligence community, demanding that the film's script be reviewed for potential threats to national security. What followed was a months-long standoff. Redford found himself stuck in a bureaucratic limbo, unable to move forward with filming or casting, as the project was delayed by a series of legal battles. But that wasn't the worst of it. As the rumors swirled, Eastwood's actions took a more underhanded turn. According to a leaked report, Eastwood also hired a PR firm to spread damaging rumors about Redford, claiming that the actor was associating with anti-American organizations and undermining national security. But it didn't stop there. The worst blow came in 2007, after Redford gave a passionate speech at the Directors Guild of America, criticizing the Bush administration's immigration policies. The next day, Eastwood allegedly leaked a distorted version of Redford's comments to a right-wing publication, turning Redford into the villain in an ongoing culture war. Veterans across the country protested, conservative media outlets lambasted him, and Redford's reputation was publicly attacked. Redford never publicly confronted Eastwood, but his quiet anger was palpable. The divide was canceled, and Redford's anger at Eastwood's manipulation of public opinion left an indelible mark on their relationship. The two would never share a professional or personal bond again. Barbra Streisand was a powerhouse in Hollywood, a woman whose influence spanned across multiple industries. Her accolades were endless: an Oscar, Grammy, Tony, Emmy, and Golden Globe, not to mention her groundbreaking success as a director in an industry dominated by men. But it was her relationship with Robert Redford that would define a unique chapter of Hollywood history, a chapter that was marked not by mutual admiration, but by deep, unresolved tension. Their most iconic collaboration came with The Way We Were in 1973, where Redford and Streisand portrayed one of cinema's most unforgettable couples. The film's success cemented them as one of Hollywood's most beloved pairings, and for a brief moment, the public saw them as an inseparable duo. But behind the scenes, their connection was far from harmonious. Redford's refusal to work with Streisand again would sow the seeds of a professional rift that would last decades. The tensions flared in the late 1980s when Streisand, eager to work with Redford again, wrote the script for The Prince of Tides, a film she intended to direct and star in. From the outset, the male lead was always intended for Redford. She sent him the script, along with a self-composed music score and a handwritten note that read, "No one else but you." It was a personal plea, an invitation to reunite both on and off the screen. But Redford's response was unequivocal. He declined. No explanation, no hedging, just a simple, firm refusal. His response came through his assistant, who relayed the message: "I don't act in films directed by Barbra. Please don't send anything else." Streisand didn't react publicly at first, but her frustration simmered just beneath the surface. The media quickly caught wind of the snub, and when asked about Redford's absence from The Prince of Tides, Streisand didn't hold back. "He was afraid, not of the role, but of me, of a woman behind the camera," she remarked, implying that Redford was unwilling to work under the direction of a woman, a sentiment that would spark an intense media firestorm. Her words ignited a chain reaction in Hollywood. Redford's refusal to star in the film became the topic of heated debates in industry circles. Within 3 weeks of Streisand's public comments, Redford lost 2 major film deals. The studios didn't want to get caught in the middle of a gender war, so they quietly distanced themselves from the actor. Streisand's influence was formidable, and she wielded it expertly, using the media to turn the tables on Redford. But the most cutting blow came during a 1992 Oscars press conference. Streisand, who had just received 7 nominations for The Prince of Tides, including Best Picture, expressed her discontent when she wasn't nominated for Best Director. "If this film had been directed by Redford, I bet he would have a nomination by now," she declared, insinuating that her gender had been a barrier to recognition. Streisand's insinuations continued to chip away at Redford's standing in Hollywood. Behind the scenes, producers and directors who had once eagerly worked with him began to hesitate. For nearly a decade, the unspoken boycott continued, and Redford's career suffered quietly under the weight of Streisand's power. It wasn't until years later that Redford admitted the truth in private to a few close friends. "I've never hated anyone for being a woman, but Barbra, she's a force, and I don't want to live under the shadow of that power." By the time Redford sat down to write his infamous list at the age of 88, Streisand's name was written in red ink, followed by a single line: "The greatest disappointment of my life." because I trusted her that much. The Hollywood love story between Robert Redford and Jane Fonda was once the stuff of legend. The pair had co-starred in 4 films together, including Barefoot in the Park and The Electric Horseman, creating an undeniable on-screen chemistry that left fans captivated. Off-screen, their friendship was just as close, intellectual, respectful, and filled with admiration. Redford once praised Fonda for her sharp mind and beautiful heart, and Fonda reciprocated, calling Redford the co-star I feel safest with. For years, they were the perfect example of what a Hollywood friendship could be, until one role and one woman tore it all apart. In 1999, Redford was preparing to direct An Unfinished Love, a romantic drama adapted from a French novel he had cherished for over a decade. Redford envisioned the female lead as his girlfriend at the time, French actress Cléa Poésy, giving her the opportunity to step into the Hollywood limelight. It was his gift to her, a chance to showcase her talent in a major American film. But Jane Fonda had other plans. After taking a long break from acting, Fonda was eager for a comeback, and the role in An Unfinished Love caught her attention. She sent Redford multiple offers, rewrites, demo tapes, and even flew to Colorado to meet with him for what she called a serious artistic discussion. Despite her persistent efforts, Redford refused. The role was reserved for Cléa, and no amount of persuasion could change that. Weeks later, a tabloid storm erupted, with headlines accusing Redford of playing favorites and using his film to boost his young lover's career. It wasn't long before Fonda made her own public comment on the matter. During a CNN interview, when asked about Redford's choice of an inexperienced actress, Fonda delivered a crushing remark. "I just think a director should cast the right person, not the one they sleep with every night." The words struck Redford deeply. It wasn't just a jab at his romantic life. It was a direct hit at his professional integrity. The backlash was swift, and soon the project was in turmoil. Studios pulled out, and An Unfinished Love was canceled. Redford, ever the professional, said nothing publicly, but internally, he was devastated. The film he had worked so hard to bring to life was now nothing more than a casualty of gossip and ego. But the betrayal didn't end there. 3 years later, an internal investigation revealed that Fonda had ordered a smear campaign against Poésy, trying to undermine her and paint her as an unworthy lead. When Redford discovered this, he did what he had to do. He wrote a letter to Fonda, not apologizing, but cutting ties. Their 40-year friendship was over, shattered by one hurtful betrayal. According to Hollywood reporter Sidney Pollack, Redford handled the situation privately. He never spoke a word to Fonda after that, but he did something that spoke volumes. During a quiet night in his private Utah cabin, Redford crumpled Fonda's handwritten apology letter and burned it, silently staring into the flames. "Never thought the one who understood me best would be the one to crush me the deepest," Pollack recalled Redford saying. Fonda, once considered his closest ally in Hollywood, was now nothing more than a ghost of the past, her name forever etched in Redford's mind as a betrayal that shattered their once unbreakable bond. By 2007, Robert Redford was a seasoned Hollywood veteran, a director and actor whose career spanned decades. He had already established himself as an artist who prioritized substance over spectacle, always seeking to elevate the cinematic experience with thought-provoking narratives. But his collaboration with Tom Cruise would soon prove that, even in the twilight of his career, Redford still had a lot to lose. But as production went on, it became clear that Cruise was slowly taking over. The film's script was rewritten day by day, with Cruise's role becoming larger, his lines longer, his character more prominent. The dialogue shifted from being a reflective exploration of societal issues to a vehicle for Cruise's self-aggrandizement. Worse still, Cruise began to lobby the studio to change the film's promotional materials. Instead of a group shot featuring all 3 leads, Cruise insisted on a dramatic solo profile of himself with the tagline, "Courage is contagious." For Redford, this was the tipping point. Lions for Lambs was supposed to be his film, not a platform for Cruise to rebrand himself. But Cruise didn't seem to care. He was booking appearances on 20 different talk shows and barely mentioning Redford. Variety even ran an article with the provocative headline, "Did Tom Cruise save Robert Redford from obscurity?" A direct slap in the face to the veteran director. Redford's anger reached its boiling point when he discovered that the studio had organized a private screening of the film for conservative donors in Washington, D.C., without informing him. This screening, meant to cater to political elites, had been entirely hijacked for Cruise's purposes. Redford felt utterly sidelined. It was no longer his film. He felt like a supporting actor in his own project. Redford immediately withdrew from all media interviews and, in a conversation with his close friend, director Alan Pica, he admitted that he had never felt so humiliated. "This is the first time I ever directed a film and felt like a supporting actor in my own film," he said bitterly. For Redford, Lions for Lambs wasn't just a film. It was a betrayal of his artistic vision. Tom Cruise, in his quest for personal branding, had transformed the movie into a vehicle for his own image, leaving Redford's intentions and creativity trampled beneath the weight of Cruise's larger-than-life persona. This would mark the last time Redford ever worked with Cruise. Warren Beatty was a dazzling star, charismatic, enigmatic, and one of the most sought-after leading men in Hollywood. He was the epitome of a cinematic heartthrob, with a reputation for being both irresistibly charming and dangerously unpredictable. But to Robert Redford, Beatty's allure was much more than skin deep. They shared a similar rise in Hollywood, both enjoying immense popularity and influence. Yet despite their parallel careers, their relationship would ultimately become a toxic one, with Beatty's actions causing Redford's worldview to shatter. It all began in 1976, when Redford was dating a rising young actress, one who had been invited to audition for a major political film that Beatty was producing, Shampoo. But when the actress returned from the audition, her face was streaked with tears. She told Redford what had transpired behind closed doors. He hadn't conducted a proper audition. Instead, he'd used the opportunity to ask probing, deeply personal questions about Redford's life. "Has anyone ever seen Redford coming out of another actor's house?" Beatty had asked, his voice a casual whisper, as if it were a perfectly normal question. "Did he ever mention who helped him avoid that gay scandal back in the day?" Redford was taken aback. He was stunned, not just because Beatty had brought up such a personal topic, but because it felt like a calculated attempt to dig up something Redford had worked hard to keep buried. A secret that, once exposed, could have destroyed both his career and personal life. It wasn't just a question, it was a subtle attack, one designed to destabilize and undermine Redford's carefully constructed public image. Determined to confront the situation head-on, Redford did what he had always done. He took matters into his own hands. He invited Beatty to dinner at his Santa Monica home, hoping to clear the air. But when he slid the article across the table, asking Beatty if he knew who had written it, Beatty didn't answer. Instead, he stood up, set down his wine glass, and coldly replied, "You should be more careful with your own past before you start blaming others." Then, without another word, he walked out. From that moment on, Redford knew the relationship with Beatty was forever broken. There would be no reconciliation, no understanding. No words were spoken, but the silence between them was louder than any confrontation could have been. In the years that followed, Redford began to notice the ripple effects of Beatty's actions. He lost a role in Apocalypse Now, with the director choosing Martin Sheen instead, in part because of the whispers that Redford's personal life was a liability. Redford suspected that Beatty had used his influence to sabotage the campaign, even if indirectly. It became clear to Redford that Beatty, a man with such control over his own image, would stop at nothing to ensure that Redford didn't overshadow him. In 1981, Redford was on the verge of an Oscar nomination for Brubaker, a political drama, but the campaign was mysteriously pulled at the last minute. A leaked tape later revealed that someone powerful had made a call to halt the campaign, advising the producers that Redford shouldn't be the face of a political film. Redford knew in that moment it was Beatty's shadow that had loomed over him yet again. Their relationship ended not in a confrontation, but in a silent, painful withdrawal. No more phone calls, no more mutual respect. Redford had once called Beatty a friend, but now Beatty was just another name on a list of betrayals. A man who used his power to tear down others, without a second thought. Paul Newman was the last name anyone would expect on Robert Redford's list of enemies. For decades, they were Hollywood's golden duo. Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid and The Sting were more than just iconic films. They represented a friendship that the world admired. To the public, they were the epitome of camaraderie, two actors who understood each other perfectly, both on and off screen. But behind the scenes, their relationship was much colder than anyone realized. Redford, who had once called Newman a true soulmate, felt the distance growing between them. especially as he ventured deeper into directing. While Newman remained the golden boy, Redford found himself constantly overshadowed. Directors often chose Newman for roles, claiming he had the box office draw that Redford lacked. Redford had always respected Newman's talent, but he couldn't ignore the growing resentment he felt every time another door was shut in his face. The turning point came in 1976, when Redford overheard Newman make a cruel comment to a studio executive, dismissing Redford as someone who should be wiping sweat off someone who can actually act. Redford, hurt and shocked, knew that their friendship had always been more of a public performance than a real connection. When Newman passed away in 2008,